Namaste. Welcome to the Hindu Parenting Podcast. We are back with one more festival episode. This time, let's find out all about Lohri. Lohri is celebrated a day before Makara Sankranti, mainly in Punjab and Haryana. To share her knowledge and tell us about the importance of Lohri, we have Charuji, a media scholar. We also have a person who goes by the handle Curiosity on Twitter. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rekha.
Thank you. Namaste.
It's great to have you both. To start with, can you tell us the meaning of the word Lohri?
Lohri stands for the holy fire that's lit in the festival. So Lohri means the fire, basically.
Okay, so a bonfire is part of the celebration.
Yes, the bonfire that's part of the celebration, the holy fire, that's called Lohri.
Okay,
Well, we do
and
have a similar thing in the south, right? A bonfire, which is called
Yes.
bhogi,
yes,
isn't it?
it comes from the Telugu states. And in fact, last year we did the festival of Makara Sankranti from the Telugu states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. And that's where, Bhogi happens. We had a person from Telangana to speak
Yeah,
last year.
yeah.
And
But I think bhogi happens even in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu also it is there.
And it happens
Sorry?
around Makar Sankranti. It happens around Makar
yes,
Sankranti.
again, it's one day
Day
before
before.
Makara Sankranti.
Okay,
Yeah.
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 So same idea. It's actually honoring the sun because the sun is making an upward movement. Yeah.
But
Maybe.
in the Punjab area that you both come from, what is the significance of Lohri?
Okay, so I know, typically today, Lohri is being called as a harvest festival or many other things, especially because it comes so close to Makar Sankranti. But my memory of Lohri is very different from what I heard from my grandparents. Uh, Very, very different significance. And my grandfather always used to make sure that this significance is not lost on us, because the popular culture in all the Punjabi clubs, the Punjabi sabhas, etc., used to be, we are celebrating a harvest festival. And my grandfather always emphasized that this is not a harvest festival. Harvest festival of Punjab is Baisakhi. So you're not celebrating harvest festival. Lohri has a very different significance, and it is tied to so-called, small victories of people in those bleak times. I can narrate the story that my grandfather used to narrate to us, if that's okay.
That would be wonderful. Please go ahead.
So, Lohri originates from a place called Shekhupura. Shekhupura was a village which is now currently in West Pakistan, Punjab, which is part of Pakistan. My grandfather's Nanihal, that means his mother's home was close to Shekhupura, so he kind of has connects to that place as well. So Lohri actually originates from a place called Shekhupura. Now the story goes by, Akbar was ruling at that point in time. Bleak times, Hindus had to pay jizya. They couldn't marry as per their own choice. They couldn't celebrate their own festivals as per their own choice. So there were a lot of difficulties at that point in time. And during that time, one character called Dulla Bhattiwaala, Bhatti is the surname probably. He was like a Robin Hood of those times. What he used to do is, he used to, I think he had some connect with Akbar's soldiers, etc. as well, but then he kind of broke off from them, seeing the tyranny of the whole Mughal Sultanate and how they were torturing Hindus, etc. So he kind of broke off and he started helping the villagers and people around him, because he felt that what was happening was not good. So he emerged like a Robin Hood in the area. So what he would do is, he would protect girls from being carried away by Mughals. He would, protect cows from being slaughtered by the Mughals, at that point in time. He would also, kind of do dacoity or etc., or, rob the government, or so to say, the treasury of the government, and he would pass on to that money to the villagers, which would help them pay jizya and help them not convert, or help them do, get their lands back from the Muslim zamindars, etc. So he kind of emerged as a Robin Hood of this area. And he was from this village, Shekhupura. The story goes by that, you know, obviously because Dulla Bhattiwaala, and he had collected a force of many young men who were very, supportive of the cause, etc. So they were being a nuisance to Akbar, and obviously every time they would collect jizya and they would be taking it back to the treasury, and Dulla Bhattiwala and his men would rob them and distribute it back to the villagers, and support them in some things, in these things. So obviously, Akbar and his Subedars were very, very troubled by this guy. So Akbar sent one of his trusted Subedar who was named Asif Khan. He said, "Go to Shekhupura and get me this Dulla Bhattiwala. He's become a big nuisance now." So Asif Khan goes with a whole band of soldiers to kind of catch hold of Dulla Bhattiwala. It is winter season, December, around December. What we call in Hindi as Poos ka Mahina. They all go there and they go to this village Shekhupura. On the outskirts of this village Shekhupura, there is a mosque, a big mosque, and there's a Maulvi in that mosque, and there is also a well, just outside this mosque. So Asif Khan goes there. It's winter time. He puts the charpai on the terrace of the mosque and he lays down, and he sends his soldiers, "Go and find me Dulla Bhattiwala. You go in all directions, find out from the villagers and catch hold of Dulla Bhattiwala while I'll rest here." So he lays down in the winter sun, and basking in the sun, and his men go out to kind of catch hold of Dulla Bhattiwala. There, because it's a well, so villagers used to fill water from that well. So a group of girl comes to that well to fill water, and among this group there is a very beautiful girl whose name is Sundari. She was named Sundari because probably she was very beautiful, but she's one of the most beautiful girl in not just this village but in the whole area there. So Asif Khan, who's lying in the sun, he sees her from a distance, and he's just besotted with this girl because she's so beautiful, and he's like, I must have her. He's just filled with lust, and he wants to get hold of this girl. He approaches the girl, but girl realizes that his intentions are not good, so she runs away. So then he inquires from the Maulvi, "Who's this girl? She's so pretty." Maulvi says she's the local Brahmin's daughter. Her name is Sundari. So Asif Khan goes to this Brahmin's house. He's a poor Brahmin. He tells him that, I really like your daughter and I want to marry her. Give her to me. So obviously Brahmin is not happy with the idea, and no Hindu parent wants the daughter to get married to a Muslim, to be part of the Muslim harem, and obviously definitely not Asif Khan. So he is very troubled and he doesn't know what to say. But then suddenly he says, "This is, Poos ka Mahina, which is that winter month. And Hindus don't have marriages in Poos. So why don't you come after Poos, and I'll be happy to marry my daughter," because he just wants to buy some time. So he makes this excuse, and Asif Khan gives him some money for buying jewelry, clothes, etc. And he says, "Okay, prepare for the wedding. I'll come when Poos is over." So he goes away. They look for Dulla Bhattiwala for a few days in the area. They don't find him, so they all go away. Now Brahmin is really worried and he doesn't know what to do. So he goes around asking people who can help me. Asif Khan, can somebody help my daughter? Asif Khan will come as soon as Poos is over and he'll take away my daughter. What should I do? So the village elders suggest to him that, see, the only person who can take panga with, or who can really hold fort against Mughal is Dulla Bhattiwala. Nobody else has either the wherewithal or the courage to kind of even face Mughals. So the only way that you can probably protect your daughter is approach Dulla Bhattiwala. So Dulla Bhattiwala is, by that time, he's not young. He's like in his late 40s probably or something. So this Brahmin kind of goes looking out, say, "I want to meet Dulla Bhattiwala." Finally, he meets Dulla Bhattiwala after a few days. And he narrates his ordeal saying that, "This is how Asif Khan saw my daughter. Now he wants to marry. What do I do?" So Dulla Bhattiwaala says, don't worry. Now she is my daughter and it's my headache. You go tension free. I'll marry her before Asif Khan comes to you, and your daughter will be all protected. Don't worry about it. You go back home and just prepare for the wedding. So this Brahmin goes back. Uh, Meanwhile, Dulla Bhattiwala looks for a suitable boy in a village which is, far away from Shekhupura, but similar Brahmin family, nice people, etc. So he finds a suitable boy for this, girl. And on 13th night, which is when the poos is just about to get over, he brings this boy and he gets Sundari and this boy married around the holy fire. And because, see, if they do a big wedding feast, or if they make, if they do big celebrations, then obviously the Maulvi and the Muslims in the village will get to know, and they'll inform Asif Khan's man. So they can't do a big celebration, they can't do a big wedding feast. So what they do is they just light like a winter bonfire. They do a small wedding with Vedic rituals around it. And because there's no wedding feast, what they do is to celebrate the Barat, or the villagers that have collected, they give gud, shakkar, rebdi, and all those typical things that you eat in winter. That's what is passed around, as the wedding feast, because that's what it is. So in the morning, Poos is over, and Asif Khan comes with the whole band, Barat, etc. And he realizes that Sundari is already married and she's gone off in the night, and so he's very disheartened, and obviously he's very angry against Dulla Bhattiwala. But this incident is taken as a small victory, by the Hindus in the area, and they start celebrating it as, wedding of Sundari with that boy. And that's how the whole song also goes. I don't know if you've heard the Lohri song or not, but it says, Sundari Mundari Hoye, Tera Kaun Bichara. Matlab, who will think about you? Who will care for you? Dulla Bhattiwala. So Dulla Bhattiwala will think of you or will care for you. Dhule di dhi vyai. Dhi means daughter in Punjabi. So Dhule ki daughter, she got married. Gud shakkar pai. That's what is given to you know, the Baratis or the villagers as a wedding feast. So that's how the song goes. And typically, if you see in Lodi, the significance of girls' first Lodi after wedding is huge. It's also because Sundari got married to a good man, and she got a suitable boy. She was taken away from the Mughal, so to say, trap, and she escaped that Mughal trap, and she got married to a suitable boy. So it kind of also links to girls being Saubhagyavati, and girls finding the right match and being happy in their family. So significance of girls' first Lodi after wedding is also huge. Again, coming back from the same story of Sundari there.
Yeah, just want to
Very
add one
fascinating.
thing to this because she told the story so wonderfully. I think that the song ends with Teri Jeeve Jodi. So basically, you actually
Yes,
bless, right? Isn't that right, Curiosity? You bless
yes,
the
yes,
married
yes,
couple.
yes. You, Tere Jeeve Jodi. Yes.
So that you may live together forever and ever, happily ever after.
This beautiful seamless blending of Makar Sankranti and Lodi is happening also because the month of Poos is ending exactly at that time, right? And so in that story, the poor man, the poor Brahmin said, after the month of Poos is over, you can come. He told Asif Khan, right? And so when the month of Poos ends, that's when Makar Sankranti begins, a new month begins.
Right.
So it has come together so beautifully. So we have the story, and so the month also ends, and so the folk tale, the tradition, and the story associates and transfers on to the existing celebration of Makar Sankranti, which is a harvest festival. So just making the point that nothing needs to be totally black and white, and more than one thing can be true, right?
Right. Absolutely. That's exactly what we understand that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. But what I find very curious is that you mean to say that the origins of Lodi is somewhat recent. That's what you're saying. Maybe beginning of the
Yeah,
Mughal
around
times.
450 years. Yes, around 450 years.
Okay, okay. That's interesting. Rekha, for the South Indian version, I'm not sure it's that recent, no? I mean, we don't know. Do you? Do you know?
No, no, not really. See, for us, it is again like Curiosity said, it's more about, the harvest festival. And I mean, see, harvest festival has been used as a convenient
That's
uh,
true.
metaphor in recent times to pretty much say every Hindu festival has become a
Yeah,
harvest festival, even when there
yeah,
is
of
no
course.
harvest season. So,
Of course.
So
so
true.
we really need to research, I think, the origin of festivals in the light of what curiosity has told us today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
See,
yeah. I
Makar
find that very
Sankranti,
interesting, that it has its origins in Mughal times. I would have thought it's sort of timeless, or
It's
very,
like a
very old.
harvest festival.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
if you
like a
see, Makar
harvest
Sankranti is
festival.
also celebrated. It's not that Punjab doesn't celebrate Makar Sankranti on the next day. This is the only festival, perhaps, which is celebrated so late into the night, almost midnight,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Which is very, and if you also connect with how North Indian weddings over the times you know, uh, have started happening in the night, it's also somewhere linked to that as well. So that tradition
Mm.
started only because they used to take away the women,
Right, right.
right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that we
somewhere
know.
it's also linked to that as well.
Yeah, I used to
Right.
find it fascinating how all the Punjabi weddings, the main activities of Punjabi weddings, took place in the middle of the night. Because
Mm.
when we saw movies, or we knew South Indian friends, their weddings were during the day. And, you'd usually question, isn't day the auspicious time? But they would have the muhurat for really, really early in the morning. And when we were kids, we would fall asleep because we wouldn't be able to see the whole wedding because it was so late. But
Yeah.
curiosity is right. And I've also heard that from my parents and grandparents, that not only it was just about girls, it was also that the girls were usually laden with gold and silver, so they were,
Right.
you know uh, double prize.
Yeah, and imagine this is the only harvest festival, so to say, harvest festival which happens at midnight. I mean, it's really funny because all our harvest festivals are morning festivals.
True, true.
That's
Yeah,
true.
you can't do a harvest at midnight. Yeah, that's
So
quite
in the
bizarre,
And
research,
actually.
Sankranti is typically connected with the sun. So this is very interesting because it happens at night, which is very opposite, very different
Yeah.
from what happens in the rest of the country. Because in the south, definitely it's associated with sun worship also.
so when I was researching, I did read that, because what they've done is, like you're saying, it's not really harvest festival, but they connect the things that are not linked together. So apparently the rabi crops, those are the winter crops, they do harvest them, but it doesn't exactly overlap with it, but it's just around the time, January, February, so they can call it a harvest festival. But there are a few crops that actually, because there are two kinds of rabi crops that
And the
that are,
curry.
yeah, and kharif, exactly. So the winter ones actually ripen now, but I was reading that maize, which we eat during the season, that is actually a kharif. So it's already been harvested in October, November, and we start having makki ki roti, the maize roti with saag. So it's not exactly harvest festival, but they, of course, they can call everything that because they don't want to go deep into the story. So when you listen to curiosity's story, then you realize that there are some other meanings in the way the festival is celebrated now.
True, true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it is a harvest festival, obviously you should be having whatever is harvested at that time, which is true
Right.
in the south. People do have whatever is harvested at that time. It's the new rice, which is used to make that pongal.
Right.
So it is connected in some ways to the harvest. So yeah,
Mhm.
as you said, anything can be connected to harvest to
Right.
desacralize everything. So
Yeah.
that's the way to do it. So
And
Yeah.
Punjab does have a harvest festival. It's called Baisakhi
Exactly.
yeah,
When
April
does that
13th.
happen?
that's April,
in the
no?
month of April.
It's in April.
April.
Yeah.
So we have two things here with Makara Sankranti, two things going on. One is, the harvest festival part, and the other is worship of Surya Devata. And does Lodi have any rituals associated with it for any reason? Because from what you said, it sounds like a folk tradition, or its origin started with a celebration related to a story. So it's an event that's being celebrated. So I was curious to know if there are any rituals that go along with it.
So typical rituals are you bow to the fire, you pray to the fire, like in a wedding, you have the holy fire, and everybody sits around it, prays to it, etc. And then one of the rituals that typically people follow, and you'll see a lot of Punjabis, making a big hoopla about it, new clothes, new jewelry, which is typically again uh, very much associated with weddings as well nowadays. And then even if you're rich, you still will have those revdi, gul, shakkar, the groundnuts, etc., which is very rustic, rural, and so to say, povertarian kind of snacks around this time. Essentially, because that's what Sundari's barat, so to say, feasted on. So those are typically the rituals around, and there is also, if there is a somebody who's celebrating their first Lodi after their wedding, or a new child, whose first Lodi after being born, I think that special blessings, special prayers are being said for them, and it's said that having them around the fire kind of blesses them, etc. So that's typically the rituals that we have followed in the family.
And you also feed the fire, just like Agni, you put Ahuti in Agni, like in wedding time. Here you have peanuts, jaggery, sesame seeds, and popcorn, which is maize, and every family has their own traditions. For us, we would always make jaggery rice that day. Sometimes add coconut to it, but mostly jaggery rice, which is also offered to with a lot of ghee, which is also offered to the Agni. And if you have, like in Punjabis, again, I don't know how it works in South Indian families, but in Punjabis, you have a lot of what Punjabis call len dein. Actually, for daughters, it's only dein. You just keep giving your daughters everything. So if she's newly married, then a lot of stuff would go to her house. My mother tells me, because my mother has several brothers, but one of the brothers lived in Delhi where we grew up. And she said, so her bhabi, her sister-in-law, would send a sack of rice, several kilos of dal, along with a whole container of ghee the next morning after Lodi, because that was considered the sagan, the auspicious gift that you gave to your family. But I wanted to say a little bit also, as I talked about, how even though there are stories and everything.
Just to intervene here. So it is very interesting that you are talking about rice, and the pongal in the South, in South India, is also made with jaggery and rice, the new rice, and the dal. There is the pongal consists of new rice, jaggery, and dal. That also, I don't know if the dal is also the harvest product of the time, or the dal is added just generally. But the rice is certainly harvest related because it's the new rice, and you cook all these together. So it's interesting, as a Punjabi, you're talking about rice, whereas your staple food is wheat, right? Generally.
Right. Yeah, Curiosity's family might be different, but we do make jaggery, because so the thing is, the reason you did jaggery rice, originally it was cooked in sugarcane juice, but we don't get it anymore. So we make it in jaggery. So it was actually the sugarcane juice was cooked, which is what the rice was cooked in. And the khichdi was, I was talking to other people about getting more information. It was also a food that actually was good for everybody. And it was, it was a festival. So you could make it easy if you had a lot of people coming in. So there were those reasons as well, they said, because usually there were large gatherings. So there was another thing that my mom's always said, that you avoided eating, this was also the last time you ate mooli, radish, and sesame seeds, because then the season changed. So what I wanted to talk about was how eventually in Hinduism, because which, I'm going to bring a concept from Rajiv Malhotraji's book, where he talks about integral unity, where we combine several things, where we understand Paramarthika, which is, the eternal laws and spiritual ways of living, and then Vyavaharika, which is our behavioral, the way we behave in the world and how they're connected. So if you think about it, there are these planetary movements happening. There's the upward movement of the sun, Uttarayan it's called, right? And then it's moving into Saturn. And I was talking to my cousin, and she was talking about the fact that, Saturn and sun are not necessarily friends. Saturn is the cold planet, sun is the warm planet. And so to bring the marriage together, you combine, the sesame seeds and the jaggery and all of that. And they're also good for you seasonally, like because of that season, these foods together are, they warm your body, they clear your nasal passages and whatnot. So that is another thing. Another thing I learned was this song that Curiosity talked about, Dulla Bhattiwaala. It's actually a kind of a poetry. It's called Vaar, which is poetry singing about heroic deeds of the of some heroes or people or folklore. And so if you think about it, then it combines the art and music. It combines the folklore with the understanding of seasons, planetary movements, and then takes up this story that gives us this hero who we celebrate, and combines all of that. So it's like there is this inherent wisdom in the culture in Sanatan Dharma that understands all these aspects and brings it together. And so one of the other things that I know, and I've heard other people, because by the time I grew up, it was slightly different, but Lohri was always a communal festival. So the other ritual in Lohri was that mainly children did it because it was a fun festival for kids. They would go from house to house to ask for Lohri. And what did that mean? That meant like people go, asking for candies. So they would ask, and then they could get money, or they could get these gachak chickies with sesame seeds and jaggery, peanuts, popcorn, maize, and wood logs, the wooden logs, to be able to use them in the fire. Sometimes, and I mean, earlier times, they used to take dried cow dung, which, of course, by the time I was growing up, I'd never seen that, but it was used as fuel. And they would go from house to house collecting. And if somebody didn't give them, they would have this song called, not song, but like a little phrase, hukka by hukka, ekar pukka, which means, it's just a rhyme, basically saying this house is starving or hungry and they're miser and they won't give you anything. But I do remember that we had every house had a little fire, where we also used it as spring cleaning. If we had old furniture, we'd throw that in, old charpoys and stuff like that. But also there was a big fire that was usually organized by young boys in the neighborhood. And they did come to your house. Sometimes they were so professional, they would also give you a receipt if you gave them money. They would have this little receipt book, give us some money and we'll buy the wood. But one of the things that has changed in Delhi is like now all these open spaces are like illegal spaces to park cars. So you don't see it as often. But it was definitely communal. And then kids would stay up all night, singing, dancing, eating these goods. And the next day, which when people talk about Makar Sankranti, because it's considered a good day to give donation and share things with people, next day was the time when all the sweepers, postmen, people who worked for you, the artisans and everything, they would come and ask you, they say, give us Lohri, and then you gave them the same food, you shared all of that with them. In my house, my mother would actually make piles of rice and ask us kids to touch, each one of us, everybody in the family was supposed to touch it, rice and dal. And I didn't know until I grew up. I said, what was that about? She says, then I collected it all and gave it to the temple. And then temple used to make khichdi to distribute it among, the needy. Now, what is important about that part is that it is not just a celebration. It is a celebration with foods that are good for you health-wise, that fit the season. You also know that you won't be eating this again another season, but also within it is, whether or not it's true or how it's a belief, is that giving away things is good. it brings community together, and we also recognize that we have to share our goodwill with others, and that continues.
Charu, I would want to add something here. The ritual of giving khichdi, or us touching the khichdi and that going to temple, that's
Yeah.
actually part of Makar Sankranti, not just in Punjabi families but the entire north. So it Makar Sankranti is celebrated in Punjabi families and in the other North Indian families as well. Because my mother is from she's a typical UP Bania. So
Okay.
she brought this ritual, to our family, and we celebrated. But Lodi is something which is very exclusive to Punjab.
That's true.
But it doesn't mean that Punjab doesn't celebrate Makar Sankranti. So you're celebrating a harvest festival the next day, or Makar Sankranti, or whatever you want to call it, but you're also celebrating Lodi the night before.
That's true.
And somewhere I think over time, because those two festivals happened together, it was very convenient to put them both as part of the same festival, or the harvest festival, and call it like and forget how it actually started.
Actually, that's a very good point you bring up, because my mother is also, because after partition, my grandparents moved to Lucknow, UP. So I think they might have picked this tradition up there about rice and dal. So that's a very good point, because it was a very typical in our family too. Not all Punjabis did this, but yeah, you're right about that part.
Interesting how we integrate always, no?
Yeah.
So probably, Charu, your family picked up this tradition from UP, and it's integrated seamlessly with what you do otherwise, So I think only
Right.
we can claim this kind of assimilation without without destroying the core of what things are. You just add to it. You don't suppress or take away something to add something else. It's always the more the merrier. You do this, you do something else also. So
Right. And I
it's
think that's such
always
a
an
different
addition.
that's a different history from other systems where they have to impose one over the other. And I think that's the strength of Sanatan Dharma, to
Yeah,
not
that
do
is true.
away with the old.
Yes. Take everything and everybody along. So that's been the way. Okay, so I think we should talk a little bit about how people living abroad, Punjabis, uh, continue to keep their connect with the festival. What do they do?
Okay, so that'll fall on me. I've lived outside of
Yeah.
India for a good part of my life, and most of the years were spent as students. So that time you don't think about it, although tradition was we'd call home and whatnot. I also didn't spend that much time around Punjabis, but I have cousins and also so it celebrated much more in places like England, where you had collectivity. You see, what happens is with my work on diaspora and all, when people move, if they move one or two families and that's it, and they don't find similar traditions when they go abroad, then those traditions will go fade away within a generation's time. Whereas my family in England, in London, they were like, you've got these Punjabi neighborhoods. Now, of course, it's slightly different. They've all moved away, but there used to be like solid people living in the same neighborhood, and neighbors were Punjabis and whatnot. Then they did celebrate. And oftentimes they would have this little fire, in their backyard, because you have rules and regulations in these countries. So when I talk to my cousin now, we all have these outdoor fireplaces. They're very small, so we do have I do it, a ritual, but the gurudwaras have taken it up. So maybe curiosity can tell you more about it. Gurudwaras have made it a big festival, so you actually see it very common because it is from Punjab. And I saw it once in a temple in Delhi, because I don't live there, so they do a little bit of that in temples. But outdoors, what happens is, especially if a daughter gets married, then they do a big one. Then it's a big festival, even now, even in places like
It's
England.
become big now again in Delhi NCR because of the whole, there is this whole Punjabi culture. So Karwa Chauth has become big monetized commercial thing. So Lodi's also become similar, right? So like my society, they used to do a small one, but typically as the Punjabi, families kind of increased, and it's not like it's majority Punjabi. I think probably 10% of Punjabi families in the entire, condominium. But we have a huge Lohri celebration now. So they put up this huge bonfire with all the popcorn, the jaggery, the sweets, and
Yeah.
everything there in the common area. And then there are stalls put up as well, so you could buy, you know, snacks, charts, or whatever that you want to buy around as well. And then ladies also put up their clothes stalls, etc. So it's become like a big commercial thing
Right.
now. And I think that's the way with Punjabis. I mean, everything becomes like a big festival over time. So
Right.
that's what
Right.
happened here.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's good to hear, though. I was in like a few years ago. I was in Delhi for Lodi, and I was surprised to see that there was so many fires on that day. And when I've spent time in London around that time, I hardly saw anything in the US because US is so huge that it's spread out. And where I live, there are less than like 10 Indian families in the entire town, and most of them are not Punjabis. So, you know, in so wherever when people go abroad, if you are many families together, there is much more incentive to celebrate, and that is why it is important for temples to keep it alive, like gurdwaras have kept it alive. This is just my suggestion.
I totally agree with you, Charu.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is this also danger of, one section, or, I don't want to call them out, but taking
Right,
and
I know.
usurp festival, which is not something that we want.
Exactly, because so now because of this whole identity issues that we have, it's like no, this is celebrated by this or them. Like I have to explain to people, how can you be a Punjabi? You're not a Sikh. No, I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
Right. I have to explain that I'm a Punjabi, but not a Sikh. And
yeah,
it's so difficult to explain that to people sometimes.
yeah. So
No,
to say, yeah,
you're bringing up a very good point, because people who are not closely associated with the culture, this is the mistake that we all make, especially people quite removed, like from the South, and also because of what Bollywood has portrayed.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of misconceptions about Northern cultures, especially about Punjabi culture, I feel. It has kind of been distorted quite a bit by Bollywood. That's just my,
a
thought on
lot,
that.
a lot by Bollywood.
A lot by Bollywood.
Yeah,
And there is
Yeah.
this one section which is trying to hijack some of the culture, and then there's this Pakistani Muslim groups which are again also trying to lay claims to that culture. So,
right.
we're being kind of pounced on all sides there.
Right. And I think, we Hindus in general tend to let ourselves be boxed in and not lay claim to the original culture. And I do find that many things, like, for example, I have a feeling that, Bangladesh is taking the sari. If it goes out of fashion here, then, they dress in saris, and, it's all
Right,
the same look, no
right,
bindi, but sari.
right.
And so, I mean, I think we have to have our GI tag, on a lot of the traditions that we have. Otherwise, it's going to just be appropriated, including things like yoga, as we very well know what's happening.
I'm, I'm going to give you an
So,
example here in our neighborhood, right across. We had a family, Thakur family, and the lady spoke Punjabi very well, and the uncle didn't. But I knew that, he understood, and I also knew that he must have been Punjabi because they were older people. They were probably Punjabis, only married Punjabis. One time I asked him, I said, "Uncle, how come you don't speak Punjabi?" And he said, "Beta, because I'm from Haryana. I'm from that part where we didn't speak Punjabi, but we are Punjabis." So that's another diverse part of India because we divided states and based on languages. Sometimes you
mm,
don't speak the language, but you are from that culture, you know?
yes,
And this
yes.
is such a diverse, so that's this boxing that you said, I like curiosity said Hindi is her language. I spoke Hindi. I taught myself Punjabi by watching YouTube only recently, and I want to read and write it as well. But I spoke Hindi all my life, but not Punjabi. But I can understand it completely because I grew up in a Punjabi neighborhood, and rituals are Punjabi, and I was ashamed to see the way Punjabis are portrayed in Bollywood, by the way, many times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what we cannot say, talk about a culture in binaries or things like that. It's so varied because I brought up a point about how we just keep on assimilating and not throwing out the old.
Right.
Rekha brought up the important point of how others are appropriating our traditions, and sort of we are discarding them. So
Right.
we are such a, I mean, I don't know how diverse we are. It's just so impossible in one sense to make sense of us. I think that's why
Right.
we've also survived probably in whatever decadent way, maybe currently, but we have just survived because we're so complex and so difficult to understand, for somebody who's only used to a certain way of thinking and looking at things. So
Right.
that's
Right.
Unless we learn to proudly not just embrace but proclaim our diversity and culture and feel proud about it openly, we risk this boxing in and appropriation by others. So that um, movement, again, it's best taught, I think, within families, the pride for your
Family.
culture and the courage to speak openly about it and say, yes, this is mine and I'm proud of it. And this is
Right.
true diversity. So again, coming back to this parenting podcast. So this is very important for young parents to emphasize to kids. And the other important point when Charu was mentioning about how kids used to go around and demand things to eat, it
Yeah.
draws a parallel with the current Halloween celebrations that they have. And I think we have been taught to become ashamed of something similar that we probably have in our native cultures, and discard that and adopt Halloween as something very great. So probably it's a signal, to us to
And also
um,
to recognize that when they're asking for it, they're asking for eating not for themselves because it's a communal festival. They will all take it to a big bowl where everybody will share it when the Lodi is lit. You see, that's
mm,
the other thing. On top of that, these are not just your candies, like also, like about 50 years ago when Halloween people used to make candies to give to children, but these are actually good for your health. I was reading about sesame seeds. They're good in calcium, phosphorus, all those things that you need for your bones, while the time in wintertime there's no sun. So you think about the common wisdom of Ayurveda also being included in this, because you don't eat this generally around the year. You use it in winters. But one thing I wanted to talk about when you were talking about appropriation is, and Curiosity talked about, she emphasized that Lodi is particularly Punjabi. And that is important because when I was researching, because I thought, okay, I know a little bit, let me research. I cannot tell you the stories that I read. One, I read story connected to Shiv and Parvati. Then there was another story about Krishna, saying that Kansa had sent Lohita, named demoness, to kill Krishna. But when I was growing up, I never heard those two stories. The only story we knew of was Dulla Bhattiwaala. So it's very important to recognize that connection to Lohri and the way it is celebrated in Punjab. Does that mean that you can have bonfire and other festivals as well? Sure. But I think we need to remember different stories. And the one that Curiosity talked about is quite important historically and to our culture as well.
So anything that either of you wants to say specifically that our parents can, sort of take to heart and implement in their own families?
I think we need to jot down stories. We need to write down stories from our parents and grandparents. We need to make sure that we don't blindly follow the stories that are given to us on the internet, but we need to have family connections where stories are passed down from generation to generation. We need to recognize that festivals are regional, even though they have commonalities. And we need to recognize if you have such a thing as going and asking for Lohri, because today you won't go and ask for wood logs because people don't have them, but you can still have rebri and gachak and mumfali, which is peanuts, and popcorn. You can still do that. These are healthy snacks. And you can create, like, if you don't have something like that in your neighborhood, neighborhood, you can create it. But more importantly, say, for example, you're living in a mixed neighborhood and it's a Punjabi festival. That's okay. But you have to also understand it's also a winter festival. So a community can create it that way, recognizing it's still a Punjabi festival. I personally think this tradition of kids going from house to house is a very good tradition for children knowing people in the neighborhood and vice versa, especially now that we are living in more and more in apartments.
That is true. I agree. It's a way to connect with the larger community, and that's what we are sort of losing.
And any young parent today cannot raise Hindu children or raise children as Hindus on their own. So it's very helpful to realize that early on and make connections with other Hindu families who can then come together. You need a community to go and ask for Lohri also.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it's something that you bond with as a community. And so it's so important to establish these bonds with other families and look for families who can do these kinds of things with you. This thing I was thinking about is the concept of daan, that we have totally lost it. I remember.
Very important.
Yes, right. Both Charu and Curiosity mentioned about how, they used to collect some rice and give daan. And then the temple would make khichdi out of it. So that's again a very important community connection, and it brings the religious connection with a temple. And it's time to stop, avoiding things that are religious in nature, because we've done that. We've run away from religion for like 70 years now, and it's not working. So just as everybody embraces, a connection to their mosque or church, there is no reason why we should feel ashamed or disassociate from religious activities in any way. And so giving daan is particularly important to tie into that, I think. And it's something that parents can emphasize very early on to both build community and also help the less economically prosperous Hindus. And that's the only way to build community, and that needs to come back again, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure you also remember, my memory is whenever like any underprivileged people came to the house, especially around festivals, and our parents would give them something, they would actually hand it to us and they would say, give it to them. And that was a very good way of learning. So they would hand me, okay, here, take these fruits and put it in her joli, or in her bag or something. So that was training us, about giving. And that was, it also felt good because it felt like we all of a sudden became part of something. It gave us some agency, and we felt so proud of our parents.
Yes. And, one interesting thing here, when we think of the word underprivileged, you associate giving things that are not needed. But when you give, you're supposed to give the best of what you have. So, especially on these festivals, kids need to be taught to perhaps give their best or to buy something new and then, give that to somebody who needs it as a way to also understand what sacrifice means. It is sharing, it is sacrifice, it is parting with maybe a new dress that you have not used, as opposed to giving away things that you have used and you don't need anymore. So
actually, that reminds me, sometimes on Lohri, you did give away warm clothes. You did. And sometimes you bought new ones and you gave it, in temple and whatnot. That was a tradition. Yeah. I actually really enjoyed it. But I'm grateful that you asked me, because I asked myself these, because I'm a media scholar, of how much untruth is running around on internet. Because do you know that some places they call Dulla Bhattiwaala a Muslim man? They said he was a Muslim man saving girls from zamidars.
So it has been a very, very interesting and varied conversation with lots of hues and colors of various cultures intermingling, and it's been really great. So thank you, Charu, and thank you, Curiosity, for coming on our podcast and sharing your thoughts about Lohri with us. And wish both of you, as Punjabis, a very happy Lohri. Thank you both for coming in. And to our listeners, we'd like to tell you to please follow us on hinduparenting.substack.com. That's our platform where we put out all our podcasts. And we will also be linking some of the things that we have spoken about in this podcast. You'll find links to some things on the Substack platform. So please do follow us there. We are also there on all social media channels. We go by the handle Hindu Parenting. And we are our podcast is also available on all podcast platforms. So please catch us wherever you find it convenient. We are also there on YouTube. So if that's your favorite platform, please do find us there too. So thank you all for listening. To everyone celebrating Lohri, a very happy Lohri. And until the next time, namaste.